everyone, and welcome to Lunacy with Colleen Marie. I'm your host, and today we are going to be talking about the week of July 9th through the 15th. And if you are just joining for the first time, this is a weekly check-in about what's going on with the planets and stars. And the hope of it is to give you a little bit of insight of why you might be feeling the way you're feeling, maybe why you're going through some of the things you're going through currently. The beautiful thing about astrology is that it speaks to the archetypes and the trends in our lives. And if we co-create with it, we can be prepared. And that is my intention, to share what's going on so that you can be prepared when things get a little crazy. So the biggest thing that's happening this evening, July 9th, is the new moon in Cancer. Now, the moon rules Cancer. So it's at home here. And Cancer and the moon symbolize this deep connection to our roots, to our family, to our home lives, to our ancestors. And it's funny too, Cancer, of course, is a water sign. And if you are in New England right now, we're experiencing like a crazy tropical storm. It is absolutely pouring. And this week has been one of thunderstorms and just erratic weather. And I think that's really happening across the country right now, where the weather is just completely unpredictable. And I think of this new moon kind of like a thunderstorm. The new moon's always a time to wipe the slate clean, and like a thunderstorm, it clears the air, it breaks up the humidity, it shifts things and changes the way that we all feel, so that afterwards we can breathe a little bit easier and maybe have a little bit more clarity. So you're probably experiencing a little bit of this right now in your life, where you're noticing that things are kind of coming to a place of new beginnings. And I hope that this new moon is one where you can really connect with that. And so the new moon in Cancer asks us to look at our roots and our family and our home, and what makes us feel loved and what makes us feel nurtured. So in this realm of your life, are things the way that you'd like them to be? Is your home environment the way you'd like it to be? Are there ways to make it feel more peaceful and nurturing? So if not, this is a time to set those new intentions. And over the course of this month and this lunar cycle, we can see these things being brought to the forefront and hopefully to a place of improvement in our lives. So what changes can we make on the home front to prepare for what's to come? I know for me, I am 34 weeks pregnant. I am huge right now. So I'm nesting and really focused on making my home feel as ready as possible for the new baby. What can you do in your home to promote that same sense of peace and nurturing? So it might mean addressing some of the unsaid things that are hanging in the air with your loved ones, or checking in with yourself and noticing your own maybe codependent tendencies, or where are you putting other people's needs ahead of your own, and how can you reconnect to what you need first, because we always have to put that oxygen mask on ourselves first, right? So this new moon feels particularly strong too, because it's got some really powerful planets plugging into it. So we're seeing this, this moon sun conjunction. That's what the new moon is. A conjunction is anytime two planets are in the same spot in the sky. And right now we see it opposite to the planet of Pluto, as well as in a square with the planet Chiron. Chiron and Pluto are both intense. They are healing planets ultimately. They force us to look at the sides of ourselves that maybe we've repressed and are avoiding. But they also cause us to dig deep into that side of ourselves, into our wounds, into our, shadows, and bring that up to the surface. And when we're looking at this kind of tense connection between the sun and moon and these planets, it can be an intense time. So this can bring up repressed feelings and that intensity, but also a feeling of primal and empowered strength that comes from not shying away from our shadows and actually looking at them with awareness, with open hearts, and with healing. So, profound healing, profound transformation is possible right now, but so is emotional overreaction. We might just be feeling a lot of like obsessive behaviors or compulsions or things that we're fixated on. And that can be the shadow side of this dynamic, where we might also find ourselves really focused on changing others rather than looking at ourselves. I know I'm certainly guilty of that, and something to be really, really aware of right now. A lot of times relationships are where we experience this and where this is brought to the forefront. So take a look at your relationships and how they're manifesting, but try to make it about how you can co-create with them rather than expecting others to change. We also have Neptune in a nice trine. So thankfully that brings in a little bit of flow and a little bit of peace. So we're able to see the bigger picture as we're going through these challenging times. And that's really important because they're tough lessons, and Neptune's kind of bringing in a little bit of flow. It might feel like it's a completely back and forth, where one second you're in tension with others, and another second you're feeling like in a moment of flow with them and, co-creating and feeling a lot of love towards them. So just watch how that back and forth is manifesting for you this week. We also see Uranus plugging in with a sextile, and that's a very positive connection as well. It lends vitality and excitement. Uranus plugs into this new moon, brings sudden epiphanies and unpredictable moments of clarity and awakening. And it might feel intense, but they're exciting. And Uranus rules electricity and lightning. So if, again, that's where the thunderstorms are coming from this week, you might feel a little hyperactive, maybe a little erratic, but ultimately there is creativity, there is freedom, there's excitement here. So all of that is plugging into this new moon. Now, I want to bring up, as we talk about Uranus, this is the final week of that famous Saturn-Uranus square that I've been talking about on these shows every week. This is one of the biggest aspects astrologically of 2021, and we're going to see it again as we move into 2022. But what I really want to point out with this connection between these two planets is it's a push and pull between structure and convention and freedom and expression. So what's happening throughout this year is those two things are coming into tension, and sometimes the structures win. I know a lot of the court cases that we saw last week were kind of not in favor of individual freedom. So we're seeing the court winning because the court is the structure. But then we're also seeing other places where, creative expression is at the forefront and is helping to break down some of these old, outdated structures that are inherent and symbolized by the planet Saturn. So that's where the tension is going to be throughout this year. And we felt it, over and over and over again in 2021. Luckily, this is kind of our last week of that intensity. And come next Friday, they no longer are in a, conflicting relationship. It will come back later on this year, but for now, we'll be able to breathe a sigh of relief. Of course, we're still in it this week. So what does that look like? Well, on top of that square being there, we have both Venus and Mars are on top of each other in the sky. That brings in a lot of intensity around our relationships. Mars, of course, rules things like what we do every day, our activities, the actions that we take. It can rule the work that we do as well as our physical bodies. It tends to be kind of like the divine masculine is Mars. And then Venus, of course, is the divine feminine. And that rules things like what love and beauty and peace and justice. So all of when they're on top of each other, it can go either way. It can bring in a lot of enthusiastic emotional peace or a lot of emotional tension and intensity. So the question becomes, how can we co-create with this so that it really works to our highest and best? Now, this Venus-Mars conjunction happens to be plugging into the Uranus-Saturn square of this year. And it creates what's called a T-square in the sky, and it looks like a right triangle, all with tense connections between these planets. That creates conflict every time. The question is, do we view that conflict as something that's bringing us to a place of clarity and breakthrough, or do we just see it as negative? And that's really up to us and how we interpret our lives and the stories that we weave around what we go through. So when we see this, big red triangle in our chart in the sky right now, it brings in this potential for volatility and in relationships where, like, one second we feel hot and another we feel cold. That back and forth can happen in our relationships right now, and it might bring up some conflict and anger. Uranus then brings in the unexpected and maybe a potential recklessness in our relationships and a desire to shake things up. So again, this can lead to breakthroughs, and I firmly believe that's the purpose of this time, to shake up whatever isn't serving us so that we're having to be more honest with ourselves and with those we love. So as we co-create with the new moon today and moving forward this month, the question is, what is no longer serving me in my relationships, but more importantly in my own psyche? What beliefs, maybe even things that originated in childhood, are no longer serving me and are time to let go of? And how can I bring awareness to these areas in my life so that when the full moon comes in Aquarius on the 23rd of July, we're feeling empowered and free and able to fully express who we truly are. Tomorrow, so that's the new moon of today. And then I'm going to just kind of wrap up. It'll be pretty quick as I talk about the rest of the week, because the themes that I just spoke to are going to continue throughout this week and throughout the first half of this lunar cycle as we head towards our full moon on the 23rd. So pay attention to how that's showing up in your life, and I'd love to hear if that's something that resonates for you. So meanwhile, let's look at the moon, right? Because this is Luna C. We're looking at what the moon is doing, because the moon moves really quickly. Every 2.5 days, it changes signs, and it lights up these areas of our lives that are very emotional. And it makes sense that it would move quickly because emotions do as well. Today, as I mentioned, the moon is in Cancer, but tomorrow, Saturday, it moves into the sign of Leo. And that brings in a little bit more sun and fun and lightness into our lives. Leo moon isn't concerned with looking back at our roots, but really just enjoying exactly what's in front of us right now. And embrace it. It's going to continue throughout the weekend and into Monday. You might feel a lightness, and you also might feel a little bit of a desire to really be affectionate and demonstrative of your feelings for others. And that's a beautiful place to be. Speaking of lightening up, Mercury is finally out of its shadow phase. Okay, well, what the heck does that mean? Mercury, as well as most planets, appears to go what's called retrograde in the sky, which just means it looks like it's moving backwards. That actually has more to do with the positioning of the Earth. It never actually moves backwards, but astrologically, it still has a significance, especially Mercury, because it's what's called a personal planet, like Mars and Jupiter and Venus, and that affects all of us on a very personal level. Mercury, of course, rules things like communication, our intellect, intelligence, as well as, just technology, our cars, moving machinery, getting from point A to point B. Mercury's in charge of all of that. So it was retrograde for most of June, and if you felt like you couldn't move forward in your life during that time, that would explain why. Now we're out of the actual retrograde, but just recently it actually moved back to the point that it started in the sky. So there is that it goes backwards, and then it goes forwards again, and this is called the shadow. And then once it hits the point that it started at, then we can breathe that sigh of relief. So that's what we're experiencing right now. We're going to feel less stymied, less heavy in those areas as things start to get a little bit lighter. So we're finally able to see things move more smoothly when it comes to Mercury. And speaking of Mercury, it moves into the sign of Cancer on Saturday. So now that we have this clarity, it will really be focused on the areas around our family and our homes, with our loved ones. So taking care of business at home will be at the forefront until mid-August. So if you've been putting off things like reorganizing, getting your bills in order, establishing a routine with your kids for the summer, now is the time to focus on those things at home. And also communicating with your loved ones and speaking up and sharing what's going on. Monday, Mercury comes into a lucky trine with the planet Jupiter. And this is a particularly beneficial day to make some changes at home. And anything to do with planning, negotiating, buying and selling, those are all lit up on Monday. So that is just a really lucky day to be, making changes in your life in those areas. So you're going to be feeling particularly optimistic and expansive on Monday. Tuesday, the moon moves into analytical Virgo and until Thursday. So that brings us down to earth a bit. And you might find that you're really focused on these nitty-gritty details as you move through the rest of next week. Venus and Mars will be exactly conjunct on Tuesday, so those enthusiastic, passionate tendencies that I talked about earlier will be on high alert. And again, passion can be positive or it can be negative and intense and angry. So just be prepared. If you choose to make it about creativity and co-creation and relationship breakthrough and healing, then it absolutely can be in your highest and best on Tuesday as these two planets come into contact. Thursday, the moon is in Libra, so that helps us feel more balanced and loving in our relationships. So if you've been feeling at odds with your partner or others in your family, anyone really who you have close one-to-one relationships with, if you've been feeling like there's been a lot of conflict there, Thursday through Saturday of next week, you're going to be able to see, that they're human too. And you might feel a little bit more forgiving, a little bit more able to see that they're doing the best they can. And that's going to feel really good, I think, after the week that we've been through. So again, Friday, that Uranus-Saturn square that we've been dealing with almost all of 2021 is finally going to come to an end. So as we move forward, things are going to get a little bit lighter. So I look forward to sharing that with you next week. As always, if you have questions, if you want to hear more, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can always find me at ColleenMarieHealing.com. And I do home readings for you if you'd ever like to get a little bit more insight into your personal chart and how that plugs in with all of this. Please reach out. It's really fun to have the opportunity to share these things with people because I'll be honest, I was a skeptic myself at one point. And as I learn more and more about astrology, I realize it all makes sense, almost too much sense. So if you need a little guidance, that's what I'm here for. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week. And thank you so much for watching. Bye.